Hello, welcome to today's What's in the Workshop. So this week I thought instead of more rust we'd do a here's one I've made earlier and look at a car I've already finished. So this is a little bit special. This car has got some pretty fantastic history behind it. So this car competed in the 1970 London to Mexico World Cup Rally, which as you may know was won by a Ford Escort, which spawned the Escort Mexico, which obviously is pretty famous from there on in. This particular car was entered by Hugh Thomas, Washington James and Alan Rees. Three-man team from Wales. Washington James owned a Singer dealership there in Falls Garage, Carnarth. And as you may have spotted, it's not actually a Hillman Hunter. It's a Singer Vogue. So we think he probably had to enter it as a Hillman Hunter to get the sponsorship, works backed or something, not sure. But he probably had a Singer on the forecourt that he managed to get cheap, so Singer it is. That means you get a nice wooden dash. So of all the Hillmans that entered the event, works back, big sponsors, a JCB sponsored cars, big names, lots of money behind them, this was the only car, the only Hillman, Roots car, that finished the event. And they finished well. They were 15th overall against some brilliant competition, and a lot of the really top runners fell by the wayside with their cars just falling apart. Some of them in cases the cars had cracked, the shells would crack and they'd bend, got to the point where they're just no longer drivable. We're talking 16,000 miles over extremely rough terrain in places where there was no roads, or bomb holes they called them, so you'd be going along flat out and suddenly the road would just disappear. And there were preems, which are what we call stages now. Some of those were up to 500 miles long, 500 miles driving absolutely flat out. And this car made it all that way, 16,000 miles from London to Mexico City. It's incredible, really. Three-man crew, because somebody would be sleeping in the back, somebody would be driving, somebody would be navigating. They would just be continually on the go. After the event finished, they went back to Wales to a hero's welcome. And then the car got parked up outside. He was busy with the dealership and it just sort of sat until eventually a chap down in Wales managed to buy it, but his circumstances meant he never got to finish the car, so he advertised it up for sale. And in the early 90s my dad saw it advertised in the back of the Motoring News along with an advert for a Mini, which just sort of tagged on the bottom of the advert. I'll put a picture of it here. And my dad, he was involved in rallying in the 70s, and obviously this was the biggest event going, so he was always interested in the London Mexico rally, so he saw it and he just had to have it. So he bought the car and it was in a pretty rough state. I'll put a couple of pictures here of what it was like. So he started restoring it, but then soon found that it probably was bitten off a bit more than he could chew, so it sort of sat in his garage for decades, really. Then there was a show coming up, the 40th anniversary show of the event, where there lots of other marathon cars were getting together and drivers from the time, and he really wanted to get the car along a bit that we could get it to that show. So I started doing a load of welding to the shell, doing all the work I could so we could get at least a rolling shell resembling that car to the show. So I've got a picture of it here at the show with the three original drivers seeing the car, and that was a brilliant moment for them to be able to see the car for the first time in 40 years. That was a really great moment. So then the car went back into the garage and there wasn't much progress for a while. I did other projects and eventually got back round to it. Good friends of ours, Rab Sport Engineering, he did some of the welding to it as well. Made us a new roll cage. We found the original one was in fact made of exhaust tube, so he's done a lovely job recreating the original one exactly, but safely. And then it was a rolling shell again for a few years, painted, but rolling shell, bare, completely bare. So then the next show was coming up, the 50th anniversary, the big one. So that's really where I came in for a second time and had to build the whole car. This was a little bit tricky. Well, obviously it was tricky, but my dad had stripped the car when I was sort of 5. He had pictures and diagrams, but trying to find exactly where everything went was a challenge. and every single bit that you touch all had to be rebuilt. There was nothing that had survived that time. Oh, that, and we had none of the original interior or engine or gearbox. But apart from that, it was a walk in the park. So we got it ready for the show. I got it back on the road, driving to that show, which again was brilliant. But unfortunately, that show was scheduled to happen in 2020. So for obvious reasons it didn't, which then meant by the time the show actually happened in 2022, the original 3 crew of this car had unfortunately passed away. They never got to see it finish, which is a real shame. But I hope they'd be pleased with it. I certainly am. And the reason it's out today is because there's another show, another marathon car show, this time celebrating the anniversary of the 74 World Cup Rally. But all the marathon cars that are still around are hoping to be there. So obviously we're going to take this along to the show tomorrow. So that's why it's out. And I'll now get out and show you around the car. So here it is in all its glory. I'll start at the back of the car and we'll move our way around. So at the back here, it's got a 36-gallon fuel tank. Obviously they're going a very long way in places where you couldn't guarantee you could see fuel for a long time. So huge range on the fuel tank. And this is divided into 2 sections. 2 of them mixed, and then an extra one that you'd save for the really good fuel. So if you had a Preem, a high-speed section, you could make sure you were using good fuel for that. Or if you were just stuck somewhere where you're only getting poor quality fuel, there's then a mixer tap up in here on the parcel shelf, and you could choose which one you were drawing fuel from. You can also see in here some of the reinforcing on this shell. In here, it's beginning to see all this piece. And same the other side. Most of the reinforcing is underneath this, but the car is extremely strong. It's double skinned everywhere. It's got lots of reinforcing underneath to make sure it was up to the task of what it did. At the back here we've got these steps, so if you're stuck somewhere in sand or something you can jump up and down on the back, and you've got corresponding handles for that on the wings. And then this clip here is so that from the exhaust up there's a piece of flexi pipe that can go on there, so if you get stuck in a deep water crossing you can put that on so it can go through deep water. Suspension, obviously it's very high up, extra leaf springs so it's raised up from the standard. I think they are leader shock absorbers, still the original shocks on there. And then the axle, not the standard Hillman item, that's a limited slip diff, which would be from a Jaguar or a Aston Martin DB5, that kind of thing. But then with the Hillman brakes on there. Map light in the boot, see what you're doing with your spares and things. Mirror lights, 4 on the car, 4 on the roof. Well, I'll also pop the bonnet for a minute. That is the original tyre, that one, from 1970, which considering its age, doing pretty well, still even holds air. Probably wouldn't put it on the car though. Now in the back, as I say, we lost the original interior, but we believe they actually ran just the seat on the one side and then storage on this side, but I just haven't had the heart to cut these lovely seats in half. Plus if I'm going to shows, it's kind of handy to get the whole family in. But there's the original 3-point harness on that side, where they'd have sat. Not entirely sure what this was to store, haven't figured that one out, but that's exactly where it was. See one of the original stickers there. That was from Mexico, World Cup 1970. Unfortunately not many original stickers left now, a lot of them have faded away. Inside there. So, in here you can see there are a lot of switches. The controls for everything pretty much are down here. How you're supposed to know where they are if it's dark, I don't know. Presumably the navigator has to do it all, but then they're not lit up either, so yeah, that'll be challenging. Now we've got Halder there. Sorry about the sun, I can't move it. We've got Halder there on the dash, and then you'd have a stopwatch here as well as the clock. This area here, I believe, there's a cold air feeder behind that, so from the one picture of the interior we've got, I'm pretty sure that's just a drinks bottle holder, because if you can't stop for 5 hours or whatever, you're going to get thirsty. Original SOS board in that door pocket over there. Then we've got fuel gauges for the 2 compartments and the separate one on the tank at the back. We're doing 80 miles an hour currently. It's quite quiet. Now the speedo's broken. It worked for a little while and then that went, so I need to get that reconditioned. Ammeter, usual things there. It's got a 4-speed with overdrive on 3rd and 4th, and they've got it on the gear knob there. And that's the route card down there. And what you'd have for the day's route. So, comfortable enough cockpit, not a bad place to be. Alright, now we've got spotlights up on the roof here with an extra wiper motor just in case those two fail. There's 2 by them. You've got one up there. Then you've got 2 spotlights there, 2 down there, and an extra couple of driving lights behind the grille. So no shortage of lights. You may notice this front end is a little bent here. I hit a bank somewhere along the way, and we decided when we rebuilt it, although we put a new wing on because it was bent in, we decided to keep this as it was. Bent it back enough to clear the wing, but if we remade it, you'd lose the character. So that is as it finished the event. So as I say, we didn't have the original engine and box, but we did have a build sheet of what the spec was. So it wasn't highly tuned because of them needing reliability and the fuel they had to run on, but it wasn't too bad either. It needed to average 100 miles an hour. So this is a whole bay H120 1275 engine, twin Webbers, got about 120 horsepower I think, or 100, not a huge amount, but I built this to the original spec that the original engine in the car was, made it exactly as per the photos of original, right down to the white insulating tape. So I've got that. If you looked at a picture of it in 1970, it should look the same, bar the Halford's battery. Fuel pumps are original items, they still work. So you've got those 2 fuel pumps up there and the mechanical as well in case of a third backup. You've got a map light there in the engine bay, just in case you need to see things. Oil cooler, that's nestled in down behind there, so you've got a bit of a, oh, you can't really see, but the pipes are welded into the body, so if you had an accident in the wrong place you'd be stuffed with that, but I suppose you could loop it together. There's not a lot of space at the front of this for an oil cooler. The wiring loom is completely original. So we think this was made by Lucas themselves. I think they came out to the car and made a loom to the spec that these guys wanted. But the wires they used in their sort of competition department, PVC but cloth wrapped. They're cloth wrapped for the colour, but are all black PVC in the middle, which means it's extremely difficult now to know which wire is which. And when my dad removed the wiring loom from the car, unfortunately to get it out, he chopped it at the bulkhead, both sides. So that was a mass of black wires chopped. Now I like wiring, I like making looms, but this, too much for me. Thankfully, my mate Joe over at the Works channel, he is incredible with wiring. He took this whole wiring loom apart. That's all his retaping. He found exactly where every wire went. He belled it out. He's replaced every connector on the end, and he hasn't had to replace a single wire in the loom. Really, he did do a fantastic job there. I don't think anybody else could have done that the way he has. So it has twin steering boxes. You see down there the steering box on this side, but this is the passenger side. Usually it will just have an idler this side and the steering box the other. But we think to help steering damping, you've got one on each side, so there's two sets of gears to move through. Makes the steering pretty heavy while manoeuvring, but once you go along you hit a bump and it doesn't push back through the wheel like it normally would. It's got some funny oddities. When I came to rebuild this brake master cylinder, brake booster, I assumed it'd be the usual Lucas one. Nope, Italian, from Maserati, Lamborghini. So getting bits for that was impossible, so I had to make all the gaskets, but it works really well. The brakes are great. Again, I've got everything exactly as per original, all the brake pipe routing, everything is as was. So that's pretty much it. It's a real piece of history. So, what's it like to drive? Well, steering is quite heavy. Because of those twin steering boxes, you've got to push past, so if you're manoeuvring it's quite heavy. Once you're moving along it's okay, but manoeuvring is difficult. Gearbox, quite nice, 4-speed with overdrive on 3rd and 4th. Nice long legs on it, so that's good. Power-wise, good for its time. Compared to a modern car, obviously it's not great, but nice torque, nice power delivery. They're averaging 100 miles an hour on some of these Preems, so it had decent power for its time. However, quite noisy. If you were driving all that way from London to Mexico and the person in the back's trying to get some sleep, that must have been tricky. Handling, that's not bad, considering it's quite high up. It's got some decent shock absorbers, so it's fairly well damped, but comfy because of that. So it's got So, enough of my waffle. You now join us from the show the next day. I handed the camera over to my daughter and let her loose. just got back from the show. Some lovely cars there. Nice to see the winning Escort, which you don't get to see out very often. Met some people that knew the original competitors of this car. Might be able to find some photos for us of it on the event. Just a nice day out, really. Yeah, but for now, thanks for watching.